As fans of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I'm sure us readers and watchers have come across some of the most weirdest, strangest and bizarre stands in this series. Well, of course it wouldn't be a surprise to come across these stands, as the anime is basically about bizarre things, but sometimes the stands could get too strange. Multiple ones confuse, terrify or just shock the readers and watchers when seeing them in action. So for today's video, I'm going to go through some of the most bizarre stands that we've seen in this series. I'll try to sort the video out in sections so it could be pretty organized. The way I'm going to do this is by making 3 different sections for these bizarre stands. The first one would be the most confusing stands, the second would be the most terrifying stands or the scariest stands, and the last one would be the most weirdest stands. So before we get into this video, subscribe if you're new, hit that like button and turn on bell notifications. Now with no further ado, let's get into this video. Now for the most confusing stands, there are many which are shown throughout each part and only some of them I got to understand. One would be King Crimson, the antagonist of Part 5 Diablo's stand. The way the stand is revealed is shocking while confusing as well. As I watched the scene play out, I was meant to be frightened and worried for Bruno on how he's going to be able to beat the boss, as this new enemy stand looks like it could even rival the world. But I didn't feel tensed or worried, I just focused on how King Crimson was being used, trying to see how this new stand works. And even once King Crimson explained that it's able to erase time, it still confused me on how does it do that? So I decided to ask around the JoJo community looking for some good explanations on how King Crimson does its thing. And you know what they said? It just works. But pretty much King Crimson is a stand that takes some time to get used to with all of its confusing abilities. But what about a stand that leaves the reader confused way after the story has ended because the arc that it's centered around is more confusing than King Crimson? Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, the 23rd President of America Funny Valentine stand. Man, I thought confusing stands couldn't get any worse after seeing the last one in part 6, which was Dragon's Dream. So the D4C arc took way longer for me to understand, unlike King Crimson. Its whole story arc kept me reading though, and it got me excited to try to understand Funny Valentine's abilities. But man, I had no clue that the arc would just leave me so confused after I had finished it. All the people who shot Johnny were eventually all tied to D4C, which really made my mind hurt as I was slowly beginning to understand its notorious dimension hopping ability. But luckily, its other ability, Love Train, is an easy concept to understand, rather than the main dimension hopping moves D4C does. Alright, some terrifying and frightening stands are up next. And just to make sure, I don't mainly mean the appearance of the stand, I mean how the ability is used and how scary the thought of going up against it would be. One stand that pops into mind straight away would be Cream, Vanilla Ice's stand from part 3. When I first watched this section of Stardust Crusaders, I was really shocked to see how intense these final episodes, as Avdol got his second death straight away. The writings he saw before his death didn't seem all frightening, as I just thought it would be a trick and the Crusaders would get out of that trouble with no problem. But then the feeling became different, and I knew that this would be the real deal. I knew the scene would have high stakes more than the arcs before this one. As I thought about this, a ghostly figure, Cream, would appear in the view of Avdol's eyes, while Polnareff and Iggy didn't even notice a thing. Cream's feeling felt so terrifying, as none of the Crusaders sensed it at all, except Avdol. As the scene goes on with Avdol dying, protecting Polnareff, Polnareff's reaction is pretty much the same as the audience, shocked, scared, and we just can't believe one of the main characters was just killed in a second, and this time it's for real. Its shocking ability of being able to swallow absolutely anything and sending the Eden to a dark void that even Vanilla Ice doesn't know where it leads to is a terrifying ability and one of the strongest ones, so I guess it fits the right hand man of Dio. Another frightening stand would be Seamoon, the stand of Enrico Pucci from part 6, another one of Dio's allies. It's his second developed stand which sends the reader to shock once it's been revealed, as its ability and even appearance is terrifying. It's honestly one of my favorite stands, as the way its abilities are shown are really cool, but it's also got some of the most dangerous abilities in JoJo. Seamoon can repel objects and people away from the user, and they are thrown depending on where Poochie is standing. If Poochie is standing above them, they fall upwards. It also has one of the most terrifying abilities as well, with it being able to turn people inside out if they get too close, which looks creepy and disturbing as well. One other intimidating and frightening stand that comes into mind is Wonder of You from JoJo. The mysterious aura it gives off when Josuke, Yasuo, and Rai pursue it, and when it always shows up randomly, gives a terrifying look to the stand, while its back is the only thing we can see from it. But in the later chapters, we're able to see a different form of the stand which doesn't look as frightening as its other form. Wonder of You isn't just scary in appearance wise, its ability is chilling. As we can see, it also has the power over flow of calamity that happens to people when they pursue him. Bad luck comes to them if they even give the slightest thought of trying to find, fight, or find out who Wonder of You is. It's a hard stand ability to counter, which makes it so dangerous and intimidating, as the only weakness that has been brought up for it is making the stand pursue you. This really makes it one of the most bizarre stands up to date, but if we're looking for the most strangest in bizarre stands, let's go into that section now. Heavy Weather is really weird. The Heavy Weather arc is one of my favorites in the series, but the stand is strange. But I don't even mean it in a bad way. It's unique and entertaining to see how well it's executed, while it's one of the most dangerous and strongest stands in the entire JoJo series. Heavy Weather is able to generate various rainbows in its surroundings, and when people touch them, they become snails. But it's also said that Heavy Weather subconsciously alters the atmosphere and creates a subtle light projection with the sunlight. And if it's seen, it causes people to think that they're snails, which forces the transformation. It's kind of confusing but weird at the same time. That's why I put it in this section, as it's more weird than confusing. Cheap Trick is another weird stand, as it completely doesn't care about the user. The ability of talking increases the user's fatal death nearing, as Cheap Trick is able to call out for other people to look at the user's back. It's just strange that a stand could do this to its user, and it's practically impossible to get rid of, making it one of the most annoying stands as well. A last weird stand would be Notorious B.I.G., the stand known to awaken after the user's death. This stand is really strange, as it bypasses the rule of a stand dying as the user dies. Well, I mean, Cheap Trick kind of does this as well, but Notorious B.I.G. has no other user, unlike Cheap Trick, who hops from one user to another. And I don't know how the user of B.I.G. found out about their ability, since how are they supposed to experiment it if it only activates after death? Well, I mean, it did say he had some great hatred in his heart that made it into his energy, which would go into his stand. So I think he just sensed that after he dies, his hatred would live on in some way, which was the stand he sent out. So those stands that I've mentioned in this video are probably what I find the most bizarre ones up to date. I'm sure I missed a few, but I just thought I had to put some of the most very known ones that I also enjoyed seeing. Hopefully you liked the video, and if you did, make sure to comment some more anime or manga content suggestions, and it could be mainly JoJo of course. So like always, subscribe if you're new, hit the like button and turn on bell notifications. It's been Endless Requiem, peace.